frequented the Cleveland Museum of Art. She talked about becoming a teacher, and she volunteered as a typist in the office at Marymount Hospital. Beverly's murder is still pretty difficult for the people who loved her to discuss. And it made front page news for months. It happened in the middle of a bright, snowless December day in the snug bedroom of a post-war bungalow on a residential suburban street matching countless others around Greater Cleveland. It was not a random crime of opportunity. It was an act of rage so specifically planned and targeted that the people who are investigating this case call it an assassination. So let me back up just a little. This case happened December 28th, 1964, the day after the Cleveland Browns' last NFL championship, on a quiet Monday after Christmas. Beverly and her 12-year-old sister Carol, who shared a bedroom in their house on Thornton Avenue, were home from school on Christmas break. They had breakfast and watched their parents, Ted and Eleanor, leave for work. And the two of them walked to visit their grandmother, Marie Vanek, just a mile up Turney Road. And they stayed there for lunch. The boy next door to their grandmother drove Beverly home because she had plans to meet her friend Barbara, a classmate at Marymount, and the two planned to go visit another classmate, Margie. Beverly got home right before 1 p.m. and she called her mother to check in. She wrote a message to her father from someone who said that he would call back. The person that called left a phony name. Grandma Vanek called and Beverly said she had to go. She was expecting Barb and she needed to change her clothes. Barbara arrived around 1:25. She found the side door open, but the storm door was locked. She knew Beverly was waiting for her, so she rang the bell, and then she knocked. She could hear a radio playing loudly, and then she heard a loud thump from upstairs, like furniture being moved around. She went around to the front door and rang the bell. She knocked and waited a few minutes and kind of puzzled, thinking maybe she was being stood up or being teased. She headed home. When she got home, Margie called her and asked where she and Beverly were. And then Margie called Grandma, who then called Ted at work. He raced home about 4 p.m. When he pulled up, he could hear the radio blaring from the driveway. He dashed into the house and up the stairs. The police arrived next, and then a priest. The knowledge of what they found followed Paul Miles on his first visit to the house almost a half a century later. I've been to Auschwitz. That was always my gauge of the spookiest place in the world. At Auschwitz, you just get this feeling of evil. I got to the side door of the house and, whoa, you just felt evil. You knew something bad had happened there. I'd been to thousands of crime scenes and it never bothered me, but this you just knew was evil. Garland Heights Police Captain William Horrigan, who became the lead investigator on this case and would pursue tips I've seen in my 29 years as the coroner. Beverly apparently had been surprised while she was changing her clothes. She had been strangled with a rope and stabbed 42 times. Her clothing had been yanked away from her torso, but she had not been assaulted. Gerber ruled strangulation as the cause of death, but said that the knife wounds would have been enough to kill her. This person came with 2 weapons. Unless you're planning it, I don't know why you'd have 2, they said. Someone was stalking her, Miles said. Beverly's mother, Eleanor, and her sister, Carol, recalled the stalking during a recent interview at Carol's house in Northeast Ohio. Both of the women remembered hang-up phone calls, sometimes between 10 and 12 a day, on the family's party line phone before the murder. They remembered the anonymous gift of her bracelet and a ring left on the back porch, with a note that said, "To Bev." Carol said her father came home one night and saw someone standing on their lawn staring up at the girls' bedroom. Ted had chased him down the block, but he did not catch him. Bev had become jumpy. She was always very careful to lock the doors and shut the blinds. She checked in by phone whenever she went somewhere. And she bought like this brass letter opener that she kept handy for protection. And her sister Carol still has it somewhere. Her mother Eleanor said there was not one person I could suggest who might have done this to her. I couldn't help the detectives in any way. I always thought it was the stalker. From about the time her daughter turned 16, she said, I had a premonition. Every time I looked at Beverly, I was concerned about her. I thought something was going to happen to her. It was the only premonition I ever had. The girls' grandmother felt it too, Carol said. When Margie called her, wondering where Beverly was, Grandma said, "Oh my God, she's dead." Detectives decided Beverly must have known her killer. She would not have left the door unlocked or admitted anyone into the house that she didn't know. There was no sign of forced entry or any signs of scuffle on the first floor of the house. Investigators scoured the neighborhood from rooftops to sewers. They drained a nearby skating pond in search of evidence. More than a dozen people were interviewed almost immediately in an investigation that initially focused on friends and family. By the second day, more than 130 people had been interviewed, and then the net widened. The Cleveland Press offered a $5,000 reward. It soon raised to $10,000, at a time when the average household income was $6,000 annually. Every woman who was mad at her husband, boyfriend, or whatever they called, Miles said. One day's banner headline read, "Suspects arrest near," brought the next day's report. All suspects questioned yesterday cleared of any involvement. Heaviest suspicion fell on 4 young men. I don't really have a lot of names for you, so the boyfriend, as he came to be called, was a conservative college student. The ex-boyfriend, who would have been considered a greaser in the teen circles of the time. A college student neighbor who had an eye for Beverly, and a young door-to-door salesman with a record of assaulting young women. One confessed and then changed his mind and denied involvement. Sisters of St. Joseph of the Third Order of St. Francis. She lived there for 2 years and thought she might become a nun. I think every Catholic girl did back then, she said, but she's sure she was reacting to her sister's murder. Eleanor said that she was happy that she'd gone to the convent because she thought she was going to be safe there. So great was the concern of Carol's safety that she was never left alone until the day she was married. She's now a grandmother with 4 grown children, and she seldom shares her history. Ted Yaros died in 2012, but he stayed alone in the family house for almost 30 years after he and Eleanor divorced, and he left everything as it was in 1964, down to the radio in the living room, hoping that someday a jury might need to visit. Cranks, snoops, armchair detectives, and later online commenters subjected him and others to slurs, accusations, innuendos, and threats. Beverly's friend Barbara, who asked for her name not to be mentioned, used to be a target, and she really took a beating in this case. Harassment fell on the boy who gave Barbara a ride, the boy who drove Beverly home, and other neighbors and friends. In the days after the murder and unrelated suicide of a Garland Heights teenager, normally a pretty private matter, became front-page news. 7 years after Beverly's murder, while Ted and Eleanor were at a neighbor's funeral, the Yaros home was broken into, and all that was taken was a gold watch. But suspiciously, the backing had been torn from 2 prints hanging on the wall. Reproductions of the famous 18th century English portraits, Thomas Gainsborough's The Blue Boy and Thomas Lawrence's Pinky. They were favorites of Beverly, framed for her by her father. It was as if someone was looking for something. We're no nearer to a solution now than we were when her body was found, a detective said. For all I know, we're farther away. A public appeal brought tips in by the thousands, by phone, by mail, in person. All of them led police down paths paved with hopes that turned into labyrinths of frustration. And now, 50-plus years later, as her family and friends prepare to remember her life, investigators still believe Beverly Yaros' murder can be solved. They're wary of false hope, but they bring fresh perspective and modern technology to old evidence in a case they see as sort of calling to them. Absolutely, there's a possibility it can be solved, said veteran assistant Cuyahoga Police County Prosecutor Paul Miles, who's been working with the office's cold case unit and Garland Heights Police. We are taking steps to make that end possible. We have not stopped. So, unfortunately, that is all the information I have for you on the case of Beverly Yaros. There is just nothing else. The 4 people that were counted as suspects have never been actually named in any articles that I could find on this case. They were very thoroughly looked into by the police. All 4 of them had alibis. They passed lie detector tests. They were all questioned, fingerprinted. Nothing led the police to them except for the fact that they were essentially guilty by association, which unfortunately in many cases like this happens. Now, I do firmly believe that it was probably someone that knew her. The doors were locked, but what's not to say that the person didn't lock the door behind them when they left? Maybe they were spooked by Barbara arriving. There was a very tiny window between Beverly speaking with her grandmother she was already kind of on guard and on her toes, that maybe she would have waited for Barbara to get there before she went up to change her clothes if she was nervous around this person. But it seems to me that either they got in without her letting them in, or it was somebody she trusted enough that she let them in, and then, they were either upstairs with her while she was changing, which I would find really odd, or she left them downstairs while she was changing and they sprung upon her. She definitely fought for her life. Her room was quite disturbed. I believe a dresser was turned over, but I don't have concrete details on that, which is why I didn't actually include it in the details of this case, because this happened so long ago. Excuse my stomach. The details are blurry, and the interviews that Eleanor and Carol did really didn't talk about those details, and I wouldn't want to rehash those details if it was my sister or child either. So without any concrete evidence to back it up, I didn't want to steer you guys astray with details. I would think it was very strange that Barbara showed up to ring the bell and knock on the door, and she heard kind of this dresser overturning or scooting or whatever. This person had to have left the house after she decided she was done knocking and thought maybe that Beverly was playing a joke or teasing her or whatever. They had to leave after that, and I find it remarkable that no one in the neighborhood saw anything, which I think is why so many people came under scrutiny. The guy that drove Barbara back to her house, the guy that drove Beverly back to her house, because those people could be explained as to being in the neighborhood. No one reported any unexplained people being seen in the neighborhood, which even on a December day at 1 o'clock seems quite odd to me. In these small town neighborhoods, back then, I think it's happening again, but back then I think a lot of women were still at home during the day. A lot of people were nosy. There's another airplane coming. I live not terribly far from an Air Force base, and sometimes they do touch and goes, so I apologize. Anyway, what do you guys think happened to Beverly? Do you think it was this unidentified stalker that left that gift for her and was calling her all the time? And do you think that person was maybe her ex-boyfriend or that college kid that was interested in her? Or do you think it was someone completely different? I wish I had more details to give you. Again, it is another reason I have been hanging on to this case, hoping that I could come out and tell you that after 50-something years, it was solved. 60-something years. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that the background noise wasn't too disturbing. I am going to try to release some extra content for you this week. I just have to have Sean edit it. Please let me know down below with an emoji if you are still listening, and tell me behind that emoji what kind of case you would like to see for next week. Missing persons, solved, unsolved. What is your favorite kind of case to see? And give me your suggestions